Hello everyone. Remember the last time you had a big test to study for? You probably stayed up a long time trying to cram a lot of information into a short amount of time, trying to get a better grade. Did your last-minute cramming work for you? Did it work against you? If you took the same test now, how do you think you'd do? Cramming has its pros and cons. Relying on cramming is really bad for your long-term retention of class material. But if you follow good cramming habits and avoid bad cramming habits, you will get a better score on your test. Cramming is a great way to get a better score on your test. But what many crammers fail to consider is that they're sacrificing long-term retention for a boost in short-term memory. Cramming relies on short-term memory, which means you won't retain much for long, because that takes study over time. You won't take much from a class by cramming from it, and here's why. Real learning is incremental. A better way to learn is a concept called spacing. Spacing is like taking a bunch of miniature cramming sessions and spacing them out over a month or more. Cramming is like taking all the same information and cramming it in all at once right before a test. According to Nate Parnell in his article in the January 2009 edition of Applied Cognitive Psychology, Cornell states, across studies, spacers outperform massers among 90% of participants. What that means for us is that if you just study for 20 minutes a day over 20 days for a total of 400 minutes or 6.5 hours, you'll outperform a crammer who studies for 6.5 hours all at once right before the test. According to the same article, Cornell writes, spacing is beneficial because of the theory of contextual variability. Spacing naturally leads to information being encoded under diverse mental, physical, and temporal contexts, whereas cramming results under relatively fixed context. What that means is that when you learn under different environments here, you're going to encode the information in many different ways. It's easier to recall. If you try to encode the information in just one way, it's harder for your brain to recall, even though you spent the same amount of time encoding it. Feeding your brain is like feeding your body. You feel and perform better if you eat one meal a day, one big meal, or is it better if you space your meals out to about 3 meals a day? According to an article, or according to a book published in 2014 titled How We Learn by Benedict Carey, a leading New York Times science writer, Carey states, people retain as much information and retain it much longer when they space or distribute their study time than when they concentrate it. I'll refer to this book as How We Learn later on. Relying on your short-term memory is like building a small temporary hut for information here. It won't withstand the test of time like we're big bad wolves, like your long-term memory will, but it'll get the job done if you build it right. If you follow the do's and don'ts of cramming, studies have shown that you will get a boost in your test scores. Now let's talk about how to cram. In 1956, Harvard psychologist George Miller published an article, one of the most cited articles ever on short-term memory, titled The Magical Number 7 plus or minus 2. What this article implies is that people can retain up to 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information at a time. If multiple bits of information are compressed into one chunk, the more bits can be memorized. A bit of information is like one number and a telephone number, and a chunk is like the entire number. This is a research method to maximize short-term memory. Sleep is as important to mental agility as it is to physical agility. In How We Learn, Carey states that in each of sleep's 5 stages, we consolidate learning in a different way. Sleep consolidates learning. What that means for us is that when we sleep, we organize and sort bits of information that we learn throughout the day into better places for retrieval, much like when we organize a messy closet and put it away so that we can find it easier when we need it. We've just talked about why cramming is bad for your long-term memory, better ways to study than cramming, and how to cram when you have to. So cram if you must, but remember, the garden of knowledge grows better under constant care. You'll reap what you sow. Okay? All right.